Papamarcos. I'm an M2 at Wayne State School of Medicine. My undergrad was at Miami University in Ohio. It's a tiny, tiny town. And I studied Spanish and microbiology with a minor in Latin American studies. And I graduated in 2019, so I started right after my undergrad. At Wayne, I'm involved in a bunch of different things, the ambassadors, and military medicine interest group, plant-based nutrition group, and a couple others. Oh, sorry, I'm echoing. If you guys can mute your mics, that'd be great. Thank you. And a couple other things, but I'm sure I'll talk to all those things later on. So if anyone else wants to introduce themselves. Rachel.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Rachel. I'm also an M2 at Wayne State School of Medicine. I did my undergraduate education at University of Michigan. I studied neuroscience there. I also graduated undergrad in 2019 and came straight to medical school following that. And just from a different perspective, I'm from the Upper Peninsula. So if any of you guys come from rural areas, I could answer questions about that. And I am involved in the research elective at Wayne State, and I do like OBGYN style research. And I'm also a co-coordinator for Make Your Date, which is a club that helps to avoid preterm labor in Detroit. So that's just a little bit about me. Grace, if you want to introduce yourself quick.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace, and I am, again, an M2. I went to University of Michigan for undergrad, and I graduated with a degree in biology and graduated in 2019. So now at Wayne, I am involved in also the research elective, and also I am a member of the BSO, which is the Board of Student Organizations. It's an extension of the Student Senate, and what we do is we take care of matters relating to student organizations. So Brennan?
Hey everyone, I'm Brennan, M2, went to U of M for undergrad, graduated in 2019 with a major in biopsychology, cognition, neuroscience. Some things I'm currently involved in, I'm a coordinator for the LGBT people in medicine, and I'm currently doing some ophthalmology research through the research elective as well.
Okay, so you guys should see a reactions tab on your screen. I'm just going to go through and ask us a couple of questions just to gauge what kind of group we have and what you guys are all involved in and where you're at in your stage in applying to medical school. So I just want to ask if you want to react or do thumbs up or something like that if you're from Michigan. How about from somewhere in the US? Also, you can feel free to throw in your chats in the chat box where you're from. And is there anybody international or from abroad on the call? Awesome. Okay, we have Canada, Toronto, Canada in the chat.
Huh?
Some people from Michigan, some people from New York. Awesome. Oh, super cool, guys. All right, a couple more questions. Who is currently in undergrad on the call? How about in a career? Okay, and then if you guys want to react or do the plus sign, or sorry, the thumbs up sign, if you're applying to medical school this cycle. And then if there's anybody who's applying next cycle. Okay, cool. All right, thank you for sharing. And if you didn't get a chance to react, feel free to put it in the chat just so we know a little bit more about you all.
Yeah, it's awesome and really great for us to, oh, sorry.
Sit down, come on.
If you guys can mute yourselves, yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. It's really great for us just to get to know a little bit more about who we're talking to and to be able to kind of gauge where everybody's at. So we're going to start with just a little bit of an overview of our application for Wayne. Just so you know, and I'm sure you've heard it before, our application is a holistic overview. So basically what that means is, you know, it doesn't come down to one piece of your application that is going to make or break you. We're looking at everything, and how you are, you know, your whole story. So with that, I'm going to talk about the numbers, which are, you know, single data points. But for academics, for our 2020 matriculants, our average MCAT was a 511, but that range was 487 to 522. So it's a pretty large range, as you can tell, but there was about 100 of our applicants between a 507 and a 511. Sorry, my air conditioner just went on. The average GPA was a 375, and that range was, again, 2.6 to 4.0, with 100 people having between a 3.9 and a 4.0. So there is a pretty large range in those numbers, but the averages were, again, MCAT 511, GPA 375. For our degrees, the degrees of people that were coming in this year, our 2020 matriculants, biological sciences were by far the most common, with biology, neuroscience, psychology, biochemistry, and human biology being the most common majors for our matriculants. So with that, I'll pass it off to Brennan.
Great. Yeah, so just talk a little bit about letters of rec. For Wayne specifically, it's recommended to get 2 letters from faculty members. I know, at least when I applied, it was one like science class faculty, and then the other one could be a non-science faculty. That's what I ended up doing. So I did one letter of rec from my biochem professor, one for an English class, and then you do one other letter from a non-faculty member. So if you're doing research, that's a great person to get a letter of rec from. Anywhere that you worked in the past for a while, we built a good relationship with your boss, that's another great idea for a letter of rec in that way. Okay, and then moving on to written materials.
All right, so for the written materials that you need for your application, include your personal statement. So the personal statement is a really important chance for you to show what kind of person you are to the school before you get an interview. And it's very important to keep in mind that whatever you write, it should be unique to your own experiences, and it should also demonstrate how it would make you a good doctor. So you should spend some time on the personal statement, and feel free to show it to a lot of people and get feedback, because that's also very important. You also, after you submit your primary, you will get your secondary essays. And for the secondary essays, it's also important to start early, and it's also important to be genuine. So I encourage you to do a lot of reflection before you tackle these essays, because the prompts are designed to make you think. So I really encourage you to think a lot, and also ask people and discuss with people before you start these essays. And with that, I'd like to move on to Rachel.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the primary application, where you include your experiences. And sometimes in secondary applications, you can respond to some of the prompts with your own experiences as well. And so when we talk about experiences and what we look for, when you're doing that, we really want to know what your role was in your experiences. We're not really looking for organization mission statements for places that you volunteered or things that you attended. What you really want to do is use those words in that space to define what your role was in those positions, and then from that, kind of how that you've gained qualities from that, and how that could those experiences could help you to become a good doctor as well.
Great. So that was just a little bit more about the application overall. We are definitely going to dive in a little deeper now, getting to some questions. So before, when you guys all registered for this chat, a bunch of you submitted questions, and thank you so much for submitting those questions. It really helps us talk about, and address what everyone is asking, and not just talking about what we think is, relevant. Because obviously we applied, 2 years ago at this point, and it's good for us to just stay on top of what you guys want to hear. So with that, I just want to address initially, a lot of questions were about virtual interviews. Our interviews will all be virtual this cycle. And another question that came up was if we'll be using AAMC Vita, and that actually was changed this morning. Yes. So WSU is using the Vita tool from AAMC. That was not something that we have experience with, because Vita is new. So all of those questions about Vita, just direct to the Office of Admissions, or you can pop them in the chat and we'll take them to admissions for later, just because we don't have any personal experience with that. So first, deeper question is, what opportunities does Wayne State University School of Medicine offer for students who are seeking global health experience? Does anyone want to speak to that? I can start. There's a GLUE program, which is Global and Urban Health Equity. That's just, it's an additional program, interprofessional, a 2-year program with monthly, quarterly, and a summative project. And it's local, so it's more learning about global and urban health equity, and not traveling to those places. We also have trips abroad, obviously not right now, but in the past we've had trips abroad with the World Health Organization. Does anyone else want to talk about global? I can move on to the next question. The next question is a little more personal. So how do you make your personal statement unique and stand out? What are some recommendations you have on how to help your application stand out? Does anyone want to take this one?
I mean, I can talk a little bit on this because I think personally with my application, my personal statement was one of my weakest points because my whole statement was pretty generic, just being like, oh, I was always interested in medicine, and as my way I discovered I liked interacting with patients, blah, blah, blah. So I think like a really important thing for your personal statement is, one, to have like a ton of people read it, just to get a bunch of different eyes on it, to really identify the issues with your personal statement and see what you can fix, and also see what's really good that you want to keep. And I think a really good thing is to focus on something that you're really passionate about in your personal statement, something that you've volunteered in the past for several years that can really like show your personality and something that really made you go towards the medical field in the end.
I could also touch a little bit on making your personal statement unique and stand out. So I agree with everything that Brennan said. You really want to capitalize on certain experiences and stuff that would make you unique and stand out in your personal statement. And another suggestion that I always give people is, when you write your personal statement, first of all, give yourself a lot of time to do it and to look back on it, and for a lot of people to read it. And I always suggest that people keep your original copy of your personal statement, keep one copy with no edits, with nothing, and then send it out to people to edit, one person at a time, and then also keep your copies of when they edited it. And then just make sure at the very end, when you have a personal statement that you seem to be happy with, go back and look at your original one and make sure you still sound like you and you're still saying what you wanted to say about yourself through your personal statement. I think it's just really important to check back in with yourself. Because depending on who you have read it, you could get a lot of suggestions and a lot of different suggestions, and it can be really quite overwhelming to have people telling you different things or controversial things about things that you've said in your application. So just make sure you're staying true to yourself in referencing your original copy. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, and kind of a last thing is, someone told me, I think it was like my AP Lit teacher, to always read your work out loud. And that's the best advice I've ever gotten, is read everything out loud to yourself. Sound crazy in your dorm room or your room at home. Like it helps so much to hear, you know, if there's a run-on or a fragment, or this needs a comma, maybe this is a semicolon, like to really read it out loud and say it to yourself. Because one, going back to Rachel's point, you know, if it sounds like you, if you're reading it out loud and you're stumbling through it, it's probably a lot of your editor's input has changed the meaning of what you were trying to say. And it helps you just grammatically kind of correct those things. And then we had a question about non-traditional students. I have some data, sorry, we had to look it up. For 2020, we had 42 matriculants who are ages 25 to 44, so non-traditional students. I don't have any like specific MCAT data on that, but I hope that that helps answer that question a little bit more. And then our next question is, could you describe what the secondary application is like in further depth? Does anyone want to speak to that? Okay, so first, oh, Grace, do you want to take it?
I can talk about that. So usually for the secondary, you have to submit a photo, and usually there will be 3 essays. And as I've mentioned before, they are usually trying to ask about a trait that you might have or something, some quality about you. So So yeah, just think about it and just try to be genuine. Try to write about yourself. Don't write something that you think the admission officers want to see and then have it end up being someone else because it's not really something that you do or something that you're used to. So just try to be yourself, but also think about the qualities that will make you a good physician and put that there.
Yeah, for sure. Rachel, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree with Grace. And I think too, something that I always recommend with a secondary application is, even though you may not see the exact questions that you're going to be asked on a secondary application until you get it, you can always think ahead and start thinking about stuff like, when's the time I faced adversity in my life? How can I talk on that? You don't have to write a full essay, but just start thinking of ideas and making lists of things that could be talking points for those types of questions. Like, what are your greatest weaknesses? When have you faced adversity? What makes you unique? Those types of things. And then also, I think you guys have a really, right now specifically, there's more talk about, like, you know, how did the pandemic change your life? And, you know, what are some things that you've learned about yourself throughout this time? So I think that keeping in mind and like keeping notes of, you know, what's going on with COVID right now, that could really help you out with many of your secondaries, especially at Wayne.
Yeah, kind of bouncing off of that, Dawn did just put in our chat, there is a COVID question this year. Other things to think about when you're writing your secondaries, also in the chat, don't put anything that you already put in your primary in your secondary. The point of the secondary is to learn more about you as an applicant and to tell more of your story. And in an application where there is such a finite amount of space that you can fill, filling it with more of the same can be detrimental, to say it plainly. It's really important to include more and to go deeper. And on those experiences that you have already elaborated on, your secondary is the place for you to share stories. And really, I wrote something earlier, but it's the story of yourself is what you're selling. And the secondaries are the place for you to really weave that together and to take the individual pieces of your primary and put them into one. I hope that makes sense, but that's what I think about secondaries. I also saw a question about headshots for the secondary application. I personally submitted something with a nice-ish camera, but I don't know if any of the other ambassadors had professional headshots done for their secondaries.
I can talk on that. So for my secondary, the headshot that I used was taken in my friend's backyard with her mom's camera. I was in the UP. It was relatively rural. We don't really have photographers. I didn't have anywhere to go. So I did a backyard headshot, and that works just fine.
Great. And
Yeah,
then,
I took mine on an iPhone against a blank wall in my house. So
yeah, definitely don't need to pay for professional headshots. And another thing that popped up in the chat was about Street Med Detroit. Does anyone want to talk just really quickly about Street Med?
I have volunteered with Street Med a couple of times, so I could talk really briefly. So I'm not on the board of Street Med or anything, but I have done, I think, 3 street runs with them. And Street Med is like a quite large organization on our campus, and a lot of people are interested in it, and there is a lot of opportunity to volunteer with them. And during my volunteer experiences there's 2 different types of street runs that you can do with Street Med. So if you're volunteering, sometimes they have backpacks of supplies, and they will walk around places where they know that their typical patients may hang out, or places where they're looking to get new patients, anything like that. Or also, most of the time that I volunteered, they have certain locations around Detroit that will host them, such as churches or community centers, and we will go and provide care in those areas. And usually we try to line it up with some sort of like offered like free breakfast, lunch, or something like that, which is really cool. So there are a lot of opportunities. I will say Street Med is a really, really wonderful organization. There are so many student-run free clinics at Wayne State. I know Street Med gets a lot of publicity, and they do a lot of stuff that people see, but there's more than just Street Med. So if you ever do struggle to get time in Street Med, it can be difficult to sign up for volunteering with them, but there are so many other ones, probably like at least 8 or 10. I don't know how many exactly other organizations that do very similar things to street med, that there's plenty of places for students to volunteer.
Yeah, I think Wayne, we have like about 16 student-run free clinics or clinic type situations with students as the providers. So there definitely is no shortage of ways to be involved in the community. For me, I also have worked with street med in the past. I actually grew up in San Francisco, California, and have worked with a lot of different organizations that aim to serving people experiencing homelessness in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Street Med Detroit was a huge pull for me at Wayne State, and being able to work with them in my first year, I think I did 4 street runs. It had a major impact on me as a developing physician. So I really like Street Med. I also have worked with other clinics and have had very similar experiences. So they're all positive. Moving on to our next question, because we don't want to spend too much time talking about, all the things you can do, because there's so many things you can do at Wayne that we're going to have another session at a later date to talk about all those things. So right now, getting back to kind of our admissions application, what is the best way to write about your experiences on the application so that you demonstrate they were impactful and show why you're ready to be a physician? So basically, what are we focusing on in our writing to describe the impact of your experiences? I kind of already spoke to this. Tell a story. It's really important to start off with a bang. Like tell your story. I boxed in college, so for one of my experiences, I wrote about boxing competitively in undergrad, and I wrote about sparring the first time, and that was really impactful for me and all of that. Just tell a story and make sure that story highlights you in your role in that activity. Not, like Rachel said earlier, we're not looking for organization mission statements. We're looking for you as a human being, what you did and why you kept doing it. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, like I think it's really important to definitely have a phrase as a story and see like how it improved you as a person. Like what skills do you think you developed or improved on during this time through that story? Like, did you improve your communication skills? Did you improve your ability to talk to people? Did you improve your ability to critical think? It's like try to then focus on how these skills are going to help you in your future career in medical school and as a doctor later on.
I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about the timeline for applications, so I think it could be beneficial if we take a minute to talk about some of that. So somebody asks, when did we start applying? What's the best time to apply? So because I came to medical school straight out of undergrad, and the application cycle is about a year long, so you have to start applying about a year before you will matriculate into medical school. So in all medical schools matriculate around like June, July, August time frame. So you can't start like in a winter semester or anything like that. So they all start around the same time frame of like late summer, early fall. And so I would say what I was doing a year before, probably 6 months before the application cycle, I was studying for my MCAT. I was taking an MCAT prep course. And then I took my MCAT a couple of months before the application was due for primaries, which is I think in May. And then after that, I submitted my primaries and my secondaries, and that was all kind of in like July, August time. And then I interviewed in the fall and the winter, and then I matriculated in July of that following year. So if you're thinking about applying to medical school, you really have to start thinking about it about a year and a half before you would matriculate, I would say.
Yeah, and something to note about the application timeline is Wayne's deadline is actually one of the latest. I think it is the latest. December 31st is our deadline. So for the primaries, those have already been starting to be accepted, and we're sending out secondaries. The secondary recommendation is 2 weeks. So once you get your secondary, within 2 weeks, you should submit that. And some people take their time. Some people submit it in 3 days. It really just depends on that individual. But just so you know, our deadline for that is December 31st. And we start interviewing next month, but those interviews extend into the spring, early spring. I personally interviewed in January, and Rachel interviewed in the fall. So it's just different for each applicant. And it doesn't mean based on when you interview, your chances of getting in are any different. It doesn't mean based on when you submit your secondary, whether that's in July or August or September, that your chances have changed. It's just something to be cognizant of, especially paying attention to that 2-week timeline for your secondaries. Thanks, Rachel, for catching that. I didn't see that in the chat.
No problem. I do just want to add, somebody asked how early did we submit our applications. Personally, I submitted mine the day that it opened, and when I got my secondaries, my goal was to have them out within 10 days, which is a lot. It's fast. You get all your secondaries back in a very small amount of time. So specifically with secondaries, what I would say is your schools that you are most interested in, really think about those questions, get them written and get them out as soon as possible. But also make sure you're sending quality work. So it doesn't matter if you send it on the day 1 if you're not sending quality work. Send it on day 3, take a day, reread it, make sure you like what you're saying and how it portrays yourself before you do submit it. But definitely focus on the secondaries for the schools that you are most interested in. And then kind of follow up and try to do them in the order that you received them as well. So I kind of had 2 waves of secondaries. So I kind of did, my first waves one first, and I did them in order, kind of ranking of which schools were more important to me personally as an applicant, and then again with the second wave of secondaries. But it is fast, so just understand that you are going to be writing a lot of essays in July of the year that you apply.
Yeah, and I think it's important to schedule them out so that maybe 2 or 3 every few days you're solely focusing on those, and then after that just submit them assuming you spent the time you need. And for the Wayne State application, I took it probably 3 or 4 days and then I submitted mine.
Yeah, I was a little bit later on the application because I took my MCAT May 24th. I didn't want to compete with my junior year finals. So I took it after finals week was over. But that meant that I didn't get my score back until late June. And so I didn't submit any primaries until I had my score because I didn't want to submit to any schools until I knew my range. So then I didn't get my secondaries until I would say early August. And then it was beginning of senior year for me. So I spent a little more time on my secondaries. I was 10 to 14 days before I submitted. But that's just kind of more, I need a little more time with the writing. It's not my strongest suit. So that was kind of how I did it.
So for me, I think I submitted my primaries June 30th and then got most of my secondaries in July. And then I think I finished most of my secondaries in August. And I was able to get an interview at Wayne in October. So I think applying early has its benefits, I think.
Definitely apply early. And then I also saw something in the chat about COVID and the MCAT. So to get a secondary, it's my understanding that you don't need your MCAT score if your MCAT's been delayed because of COVID. For matriculation, you need an MCAT, I think, for an interview. Is that right, Rachel? Or is it just matriculation? Sorry, I don't want to give wrong information.
Right. Dawn or Kaylee may be able to chime in on this in the chat or verbally if you can. Right now, I think it is set that you will get your secondary regardless of an MCAT, but you may not get an interview without your MCAT. Yep, and Dawn says in the chat for interviews. So you won't get offered an interview until they have an MCAT on file for you, but you can submit your secondary application before taking or receiving your MCAT score.
Yeah, and kind of while we're on the topic of MCAT, it's the next question. So any MCAT prep advice and how to study for MCAT are our next questions.
I can start. So I started studying in January and I took my test in May. So it was a 5-month study period. And what I tended to use, I used the Kaplan study books. I thought those were really great for me personally, but I know a lot of people use Princeton Review, but any of those well-known review books are really good to use. And then between 6 to 4 weeks before the test, I solely moved to like practice questions and practice tests. And I feel like that's like the best way to really gauge where you're at and get to know the most information.
Yeah, I agree with Brennan. Practice questions are a major part of studying, and I cannot say enough. My biggest piece of advice for the MCAT is take full-length practice tests. It's very different if you just take sections and then add up the scores of those sections over 4 different days, or if you're putting hour-long blocks of breaks in between them, you're not really going to get a realistic score of how you would perform on this 6 to 8 hour-long test if you're not actually taking it in the way that you would take it in real life. So my biggest suggestion is to take the practice MCATs that are provided, I think by AMCAT or AAMC, and take those and take them as you would. Give yourself the exact same breaks that they'll give you in the MCAT, the 10-minute break between the first two, the 30-minute lunch break, whatever it may be, and really set yourself up to practice a full-length test.
Yeah, for sure. I took a course actually. It was at my university through Kaplan, and we met, I think it was once a week for 3 hours. So I took a course, and then I had access to all the online stuff and the books as well. I started that late January of my junior year, and I took the test May 24th, like I said. So about the same timeline as Brennan, 5 months. And I would say I ramped up. So like January, I was just doing the class, you know, the 3 hours a week plus the homework they gave us. By March, I was spending probably my Saturdays and my Sundays, because I still had coursework that I was doing during the week. So I was spending Saturdays and Sundays in addition to my coursework. And then by the end of my semester, it was pretty much every day that I set aside. You know, it's not 4 hours every day. It was 20 minutes, 1 hour, then 3 hours, depending on the day. Another piece of advice that I would give, it might not apply to you, but I actually took a lot of the courses that are recommended for the MCAT the semester I took it. So I took Psych 101 or whatever the psych class was at my university the semester I took it, because I'm not a psychology major. It wasn't something that was impacting my schedule. And taking it then, I felt like I was studying every time I went to class for the MCAT, kind of to like kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's what I did for the MCAT. Obviously, it's individual. Got 3 different people, 3 different perspectives. So.
My experience was a little different than all of these. I took my MCAT in the summer after my sophomore year in college. And that was really difficult because I think I only gave myself 45 days to study, but I took a course. I took the Princeton course. I had like all of the books. I had all of the questions. I think I took 6 full-length practice tests, at least 6. So I think, and it worked out for me. So it all depends on what you can do and what you want to do. So yeah, you don't have to do it like the winter right before you apply, but as long as you can handle it, you can do whatever you want.
Yes, I agree with Grace. Everybody's plan will be, you know, subject to their own personal schedule and whether or not they've taken all the classes already that are on the MCAT. So you can take it earlier. You don't have to take it butted up right next to the application process. It may actually make your life easier if you don't. So just recognize that each of your situations is unique, and don't try to put yourself in a box that's not you. These are only our suggestions and what worked for us and what we did. But just know yourself and know what works for you. I would just additionally say one of my favorite study resources for the MCAT was the Kaplan quick sheets. I want to say it was like 25 pages of just like high yield information. So maybe like the week leading up to the test, I really just looked at the quick sheets and did practice questions, and that was about it.
Yeah, the quick sheets are great. And just to speak on the like classes you can take, I personally was like super nervous about not taking an MCAT class, because I was just like, I can't afford an MCAT class. Like sometimes it's just too expensive. Like in the end, it's perfectly, if you can keep a schedule, you don't need to take an MCAT class if you aren't able to. Like it's completely possible to do well on the MCAT without one.
I can't keep a schedule, so I take a class. I have one more question that I want to get to before Rachel takes over the questions. Actually 2. What are some of the mistakes that many students make on their applications? I think I'll just answer this one quickly because we don't actually see the applications. We're just ambassadors for the school. we're not affiliated with the admissions committee, so we're not looking and talking about mistakes. But I think a common mistake that I saw in my peers and that others have seen in their peers is not having anyone look at your statements, your personal statement, your secondaries. Like you need to have other people, other eyes look at the things that you're saying, because to you it might make perfect sense, but the sentence construction could just not quite be there. And if it's only your eyes seeing it every day, it's not the best work that it's going to be. Every author ever has edited their work, and they've had multiple people read it before they've submitted it. So although that the timeline is really tight, especially for secondaries, grammar and spelling, Dawn just said, grammar and spelling, edit your work, look at your work, reread, and then reread again, and then read it out loud, edit. If anyone else has anything they want to say on that, or we can just move on to the early decision program. Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, we can move on. I was just getting ready to read that question out.
Oh,
although there is one question that I saw that we accidentally quick skipped over. I'll just give a quick answer, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free, and then we'll move on to early decision. But what's the best way to overcome a low GPA, and how can you address that in the personal statement? And then also people have asked like discrepancies in application. How do you recommend addressing those to the admissions team? And I feel like those two questions kind of go a little bit hand in hand. For overcoming a low GPA, your MCAT score could kind of help to show your abilities as a student if your GPA wasn't, for whatever reason, reflective of your capabilities to be a student. And then also some people do master's programs because then your master's program GPA could be taken into consideration as well as an undergrad GPA. And then for discrepancies in application, my only advice on this would be to be honest, and especially just to take accountability and address how you've changed from that experience or how that has affected you and how like you've improved on it now. So that would be my advice for low GPA or discrepancies. If anybody else wants to quick chime in on that, feel free.
Yeah, really quickly. One of our colleagues actually in our class has a really, really interesting and unique story of how he got to medical school. And it does include a really low GPA for his undergrad. And he shared his story with us. I think it was at orientation. And he really was, just as Rachel said, honest and upfront about what happened, and then genuine in his explanation of how he's changed. And I think in a sense, like it really does create resilient and strong people to face adversity. And if that adversity was academic and you want to be a physician, that's huge adversity. So really just talking about how you've overcome it. And that, yeah, it can be reflected in your MCAT score, but it can also be reflected in your letters of recommendation or in other parts of your application. There's a spot in the primary for you to address it head on. And if it's something that you're worried about in your application, address it there. Because that just, if you leave it off until the end, it can kind of, I guess, in my opinion, come across like you're trying to hide something. Not like I've ever seen an application. Like I said, we're not affiliated with AdCom at all. But I think that that's kind of how it would come across to me. And I would just recommend addressing it up front.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the early decision program. And I know many of you have had questions on that. So the question is, did any of the ambassadors apply through the early decision program? We talked about it a little bit this morning. None of us have personally applied through the early decision program, but we do have colleagues who have applied through the early decision program. So I'm talking on their experiences. Basically with the early decision program, you usually submit your application and you submit it only to Wayne. You cannot submit applications to any other schools. You can only submit an application to Wayne State School of Medicine. Looks like Don is chiming in and saying that 27 applicants have been accepted through early decision program for the 2020 class that's matriculating right now. They just started a week ago. And usually they have interviews in August, and most of them know their decision by October. That is the timeline that has been shared with me from peers who have applied early decision. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that. All right, next question. The next question that we received was, I'd like to learn more about how the School of Medicine connects students with people and healthcare opportunities in the city.
Great question. I'll address it really quickly because it's not super admissions application related. But I'm actually in, Rachel talked about the research elective. I'm in the community engagement elective, which is just another curricular enhancement. And for the community engagement elective, before COVID, we were had additional community service hour requirements and had to do journal clubs and other stuff. I'm saying had, I chose to. I wanted to. And we have opportunities to work just more in the community. So I work with a program called Fit Kids. Fit Kids is something that just makes me so happy. So I can't wait to get back to it. But that's something how I got more plugged in Detroit. I'm not from Michigan. So I think Wayne does a really great job of getting students plugged into all those opportunities that exist, and students create those opportunities. So it's not like Wayne is telling us, go do community service. It's like the organizations are creating these opportunities because they want to be more involved in Detroit and in the community. And the best way to know your patient population is to be active in the community that you serve. And training in Detroit means just that. You train in Detroit, you serve in Detroit, and you learn about your patient population so that you can be a better physician in the end. But that's all I'm going to say about that.
I can say just a little bit about how we connect students to the city just from completely structured activities through the school. You can do a lot of things on your own time. You have volunteer hour quotas that you have to meet, and you really get to pick what you want to do with those hours. But stuff that we do through the school that we have to do and does connect us to Detroit is that we have a clinical experiential clerkship, CEC, we call it CEC. That is second year, and they plug you in with a primary care or pediatrician in Detroit. And as an M2, we go there once every 2 weeks for either a morning or an afternoon. And that gives us some opportunity working directly in a structured clinic with residents of Detroit. And then you can do shadowing. There's all kinds of shadowing opportunities that will come through your email once you are admitted. You can also do research. And then, like I said, you can volunteer on your own time at many, many, many places that will connect you with this city. Wayne State University loves Detroit, and we love to volunteer and work in Detroit with the population of people who live here.
Yeah, and you are your first year specifically assigned to a volunteer thing in a clinical area, so that you have guaranteed first sign up to get specific volunteer clinic hours too.
And then a lot of student organizations have moved to telemedicine, so the clinics have moved to telemedicine because they can't do in-person activities anymore. And there are at least 10 student orgs that have moved to telemedicine, so they are still doing their clinic activities, even though there's COVID going on right now.
On top of that, since COVID, we have had projects specifically created where we as students have reached out via phone call to many residents of Detroit who are involved in the many clinics associated with Wayne State School of Medicine, and called just to check in and give resources and do the best research that we can for those families to connect them to the things that they might need right now. So if you come to Wayne State, you will learn to just love Detroit and love the people here and love the opportunities that the school gives you to interact with the city. Okay, should we move on to the next question? The next question is, what are the most productive and best things to do once we hit submit on our secondaries?
Great question. I personally did not do any of these things. So I'll tell you from the experience of someone who messed up this part. Read about the schools you applied to, because when they reach out and give you an interview, it's really helpful if you know about where you're going. And also, by continuing to educate yourself on what's going on at those schools, you can create, a better interaction with the person that's interviewing you. You get to have a better connection with those students that come and talk to you throughout the day or the interview process. And your questions can be really tailored to the institution that you're interviewing at. When I came to Detroit, the only reason that I kind of knew where I was going is because one of my members of my sorority in undergrad goes also to Wayne State School of Medicine. And I really struggled and I was really nervous because I put a lot of pressure on myself the week leading up to the interview to collect all this information. It really just takes a lot of stress off if you are actively preparing so that when you do get the interview, you're ready. And it also, I think, helps to maintain that motivation, because for so many students, after they apply, after they hit submit on the secondaries, the motivation tanks. And you really just watch the days, tick by. At least I did. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I just waited and waited and waited. And there are things that you can do. Once you interview, I submitted a letter of intent to Wayne because I wanted to go here. I knew I wanted to go here. Don't do what I did. Do things. It's really all I can say.
Yeah, I'd say it's really important to come with like a set of questions for each school that you're interviewing at, showing that you have looked into what they're about and show that you're actually interested in the program. I would also say though, like secondary season is rough. It's a grueling process. So I would take a week or two off after submitting all your essays just to relax and like feel happy that you did that, because it's a long process.
I just have a tiny tidbit of information, one sentence. Practice MMIs, read some essays about ethics, and think about what you would do in those situations.
Also, if you're applying when you're still in school, you want to make sure you do well on those classes that you're still taking, because in the end, you still have to send those grades to the school. And if you get in based on the interview, but have to leave because of your poor grades, that's really sad. So you want to make sure you finish strong in the end.
So we have about 10 minutes left. We are going to continue to keep an eye on the chat because we do want to address your guys' questions of the people who are on the call, but we will also keep going through some of these pre-submitted questions for the next 10 minutes. Okay, so
we have some questions in the chat about like letter of intents.
Yeah, I didn't mean to create such a thing, but basically, I put in the chat, I interviewed later. It's a personal basis, whether you submit one or not. It's not a requirement. It's not a prerequisite. I did it because I came to Wayne, I interviewed, and I wanted to go here. And so I submitted it because I chose to. Basically, I said, I interviewed, I was on the wait list, and if I'm accepted, I'm accepting the offer and I'm coming here. I don't really know if I can speak any more to that because it was over a year and a half ago, and I don't have like any hard data on that. But I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I know they say with letter of intents, like generally you should only be sending it to one school, and it should be the school that if you get into, you are going to go there. So you shouldn't be just sending out like an array of letter of intents in hopes that it's going to get you in.
I hope that was able to answer the questions about letter of intent. I have also seen a lot of things on the chat today about non-traditional applicants, and I did want to address that. All of us on the call are what we consider traditional applicants. We did all come pretty much directly from undergrad into medical school, but we all do have friends who are non-traditional applicants, and I talked to a couple of them this morning in preparation for this, and what they said is take advantage of your uniqueness. If you took years off between school, you have done things that people who came directly from school have not done, and capitalize on those experiences. Tell about how those experiences would make you a better applicant, how you've had unique experiences being a leader, how you've had unique experiences interacting with people in a workplace, how to communicate effectively, all these kinds of things. Everybody had to do pre-med, everybody had to take an MCAT, but if you had years off or you had a career, if you had, master's degrees, PhDs, anything like that coming ahead of time, you have something that was beyond what was required, and you have experiences that many other applicants cannot speak on. So just take advantage of that and really use that to your advantage in the application cycle. Does anybody else have anything to add about non-traditional students? Or does anybody have any other questions in the chat that we've seen?
Yeah, I'd just say it's becoming, I don't know the actual like statistics on it, but it's becoming like increasingly more common for there to have non-traditional students who've taken gap years just to get more experience and to make you seem like a better applicant.
Right, and I will say, I know Don has put some statistics in the chat as we've gone along today. We have some students, I know in the year ahead of us, in the 2020 matriculating class, some people in their 40s. So you can go to medical school at any point in your life. Just because you're not like the standard student coming straight out of undergrad doesn't mean that you won't make an excellent doctor. Just capitalize on what you've learned, that'll make you better.
Yeah, I mean, my mentor in my first year, I had a mentor second year, she's like 32, was a physicist for 10 years, has 2 kids, but decided, wait, I want to go to med school now. So it's definitely something that's completely doable.
Yeah, I think I'm also a traditional student, so I can't like speak to their experiences, but my one of my research colleagues in the plant-based nutrition group was a researcher out like just doing research for almost 10 years, and then came to med school because her partner is a physician. So it's definitely doable. It's a very different experience, and like when we spoke about studying for the MCAT, obviously our experiences are going to be different than someone who is, you know, fully engrossed in their career and studying for the MCAT on the side. You know, you might not be able to take a course on a Tuesday afternoon or in a summer because you have a job. So those experiences are obviously non-transferable, just because of the timeline and the situations. But I think there definitely are a lot of things that I hear from my colleagues that are non-traditional students that I'm like, wow, there's a lot of value in things that we, the 4 of us, will never experience, because we're just going straight through school. So I think that there definitely is a perspective on both sides that's really important.
Awesome. I'm glad we were able to talk about that because I know a lot of you guys had questions about that. One question, and this might be the final question we get to, is how was the process of transitioning into such a large class of first-year students? So Wayne State's class is around 290 something students usually, which is a large class. It's the largest single standing medical school class in this country, I believe. And that seems like so many students, but I will say they make a big school feel small in the fact that you have your anatomy lab group of 6 people. And then even within that 6 people, you most closely work with about 3 of them. So you have your group of 3, you have your group of 6, and then on top of that, you're within a learning community, which is, I think there are 8 learning communities for 300 people. So what, like 40, something like that, people in a learning community color. So I'm in orange, so I know people who are in orange. Claire's in my lab group, so I know Claire because she's in my lab group, and she's also one of the 3 people that I work with really closely. So we've gotten to work together really closely in medical school, and sometimes there will be people that you don't know, or you wouldn't be able to say their name, or you wouldn't be able, like if you pass them on the street, you might not know that they're in your med school class. It does happen, but for the most part, you will feel connected to the smaller groups of people that you're within, and then you will meet people based on things you're interested in. So I've met a lot of people who are interested in women's health, who are interested in lowering preterm birth in Detroit, and those things that interest me in the groups that I've done, I've met people who have those similar interests.
Yeah, I feel like there's not much to say there. I mean, I still meet people from here that I haven't met in my past year, but I kind of like that you're constantly meeting new people. And also you get so close to the people that you do interact with. Like with your anatomy lab, you get extremely close because you're with each other all the time your first year doing anatomy. And there's just plenty of opportunity to make it a much smaller community at Wayne.
Yeah, I think the learning community colors are really, really helpful. I know our lab group is really close. We like play games on the computer and Zoom because we don't get to see each other anymore. That's not true for all lab groups, but we are just, the 6 of us are really good friends. And it's been really lucky that, you know, your closest colleagues, my closest colleagues, have become my closest friends in medical school. That's not true for everyone. Some people, they join, you know, an organization on campus, and then that's their close people. Or, you know, just eating lunch in the cafeteria, that's their close people. Like, it just depends. And I think having as many people as we have, having so many students, it's way, way more of a blessing than I could have ever imagined, because there are people I've never met before. And how cool is that I get to meet them and then learn about them a year into med school? Or, you know, the people that I've been close to for a year, in 10 years, we'll all be in different careers. Like, we'll be able to refer to each other, to work with each other in our careers later on. And we have 300 people that we get to do that with. So I think that in itself is just a great part of being at Wayne. That's all I have.
Does anybody have any closing remarks, ambassadors or attendees?
I'll just close this out. Rachel, are you gonna put your email in the chat? I'll put mine in as well.
I did. I threw my email in the chat, so if you guys want to take it down, feel free to email me at any time. I'm not characteristically the fastest at getting back to you, but I will get back to you within a couple of days if you email me with any questions. I'd be happy to see an email in my inbox from a student, or a prospective student.
Awesome. So all of our emails are in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. Like Rachel said, we are in medical school, so we might not get back to you within 24 hours, but we will do our best to keep it timely. And if you have any questions, I believe we'll be sending out something afterwards to everyone that attended, that you can submit further questions. We will be doing these every month. So our next one is August 20th. I believe, Kaylee, correct me if I'm wrong. And that one will be talking about prepping for virtual interviews. So if this was great, please let us know. If there are things we can work on, and there's always room to improve, please let us know in those surveys. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you all again.
Yes, and we will say that one of our scheduled events is centered around answering questions that we didn't get to. So if there are questions that we didn't get to, make sure you attend that event, because we are going to get to everything, to the best of our abilities, questions in person as much as we can. But we will send out written responses to those that we didn't get to. Thank you, guys.